Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We are up to the 6th chapter of Matnos Aniyim, Gifts to the Poor. It is Thursday, so let us begin as we usually do with an overview of where we are up to in the Rambam, and then we will take a look at today's chapter. Okay, we are learning the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam, and it contains 14 volumes. We are currently in volume number 7, the Book of Seeds, and that has a total of 7 subjects. Let's get there. A total of 85 chapters. It's a big book. Take about 3 months to learn, all in all. We started by learning the laws of kilayim, which are forbidden mixtures. At the moment, we're learning the laws of gifts to the poor, 10 chapters. And then there'll be trubos, gifts to the koyanim, and meiser, which is a tithing that would be given either to the Leviim in some years, and meiser sheni. Another section that would be given, meiser would be given to the
Levies.
Wasn't given to the Levi. And then Meiser Sheni would be given, yes, Meiser was given to the Levi, and then Meiser Sheni was given, it's a second time. So people would give 10% of their produce, and then another 10% of their produce, which would go in some years to be eaten in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem. In some years it would be given to the poor. Then we have Bikurim, which are other gifts that are brought to Yerushalayim. And finally, the laws of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, which when we need to allow the land to rest. So these are each of these topics have around 10-15 chapters, and we're going through them. The moment with gifts to the poor. Interesting to note that the Mishnah, which was the very first recording of the oral law, has not 14 volumes, but it has only 6 volumes. And of those 6 volumes, one of the 6 volumes are called Seeds. However, some of the topics in Zerayim from the Mishnah, or as is discussed in the Talmud, the Rambam allocates differently. He allocates them to the Book of Love, such as brachos. So if you open up a Mishnah or a Gemara, and you looked under the section of seeds, there would be all the laws of brachos. But we've already covered that in volume number 2, because the Rambam picked this out as one of those mitzvahs that express our love of Hashem, and we covered all brachos. And so now we will be focusing specifically on these different agricultural responsibilities. Let's take a look at today's chapter. So we've mentioned a number of different gifts that need to be given to the poor. And now we continue with the 6th present. So what did we speak about so far? We spoke about leket, peret, eilelois, shchicha, and peya. So these are different sections, different produce that a person may have forgotten or left behind, whether it be of grains or of the vineyard or of olives, or bundles that he may have forgotten, or a corner of the field. Now we move on to another gift that the Torah gives to the poor people. The tithe given to the poor. And this is called Meiser Ani, the gift of the poor. This is an order of the separation of the truma and the tithes. This is the order. So now we're going to run through the process. So how exactly does it work? If you have a field in Israel, these laws apply today as well. So before you go ahead and you enjoy the fruit of your labor, first one needs to give trubos, which interestingly the Rambam only mentions its laws further on in volume number 7. And then a person needs to give meiser, 10%. So how does it work? So after one harvests produce from the earth or fruit from the tree, and completes all the necessary work, he separates 1/50th of the produce. This is called Truba Gedola, the great Truba, a 50th of his produce, 2%, and should be given to the Kohen. Okay, so first he takes 2% of his produce and he gives it to the Kohen. Concerning this, the Torah says, the first of your grain, your wine, and your oil. So that's the first. That's what's called Truba, the 50th or the 2% that he gives to the Kohen. Afterwards, he separates 1/10 from the remainder. Okay, so if you that's not 10, it's 10% of what remains, which means of the overall total.
From the remainder, yeah. You muted, Rabbi, and frozen.
See, now he's given a total of more than 10%, because he's giving 10% of what's left. This is called the first tithe that needs to be given to the Levi. So again, first he gives 2%, and then he gives another 10%. Concerning this, the Torah says, for the tithe of the children of Israel, and it says, to the descendants of Levi have I given all the tithes within Israel. So the first separation give these percentages to the Kohen or Levi. Instead, they need to be, not sure exactly what's done to them. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Now,
Yes.
but you keep breaking up, Rabbi.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm having an issue with my computer. I will maybe connect also on a second device. I'm sorry, I'm trying to resolve this. Okay, can you hear me? No.
Yeah, but there's a bad echo, Rabbi.
Yes, I see that.
I think you've got to work with one device only.
Maybe only use one device.
Yeah, I'm trying to get off the one.
Okay.
And maybe we should mute and
No, I think I'm
perhaps
good now. I'm just on the phone.
Yes.
Hopefully that will work.
yes, that's better.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I think we are after halacha number 3. Sorry for the big delay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
that's good.
Right. Afterwards, he separates 1/10 from the remainder. This is called the second tithe. This belongs to the owners, meaning the farmer, and is eaten in Jerusalem. Concerning this, it is stated, if a person shall redeem his tithes, and you shall surely tithe, and you shall partake of it before your God, before Hashem your Lord, in the place that he will choose. So again, we have the first 2% is given to the Kohen, the next 10% is given to the Levi, and then a second tithe is eaten by the person himself in Jerusalem. So those are 3 separations that a person would need to make. Nowadays in Israel, these portions are separated. Some of them are separated and they're not eaten. They're just discarded. But a person has to separate it today. If you go to Israel today and you buy a fruit from the supermarket, and the supermarket doesn't have a hechsher, then your banana might not be kosher. You'll have to first separate these different tithes in order for the remainder to be allowed to be eaten. These portions should be separated in this order, and the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the sabbatical cycle. So that's year 1 and 2, and year 4 and 5. In the third and sixth year of the cycle, by contrast, the second tithe, rather than being eaten in Jerusalem, is given to the poor. It is called the tithe for the poor. In these 2 years, the second tithe is not separated, only the tithe for the poor. So that is a second tithe, but it's not called the second tithe, it's called the poor's tithe. Instead of Meiser Sheni, it's called Meiser Adi. Concerning it, the Torah says, at the conclusion of 3 years, you shall bring out the tithe of all your grain in that year and deposit it in your gates, and the Levite shall come, and concerning it, it is written, when you will complete your tithing in the 3rd year. Okay, he doesn't mention the whole pasuk, but it continues, and the stranger, the orphan. So basically, it's available for anybody that is destitute to be able to eat it. In the 7th year, all the produce is ownerless. There's no obligation to separate truma, no tithes at all, not the first tithe, not the second tithe, nor the tithes for the poor, because it's all hefker, it's all ownerless. In the diaspora, where the requirement to let the land lie follow does not apply, we don't have a sabbatical year outside of Israel. So in the 7th year, in Egypt, Amoid and Moav, we separate the first tithe and the tithe for the poor, because these lands are close to Israel, and in this way, the poor people in Israel can rely on the produce of these other lands in the sabbatical year. So interestingly, other lands that were close to Israel, including Egypt, the law of separating would apply. Where they don't have the sabbatical year, they would still have the other tithes. It is a halacha conveyed to Moshe at Sinai that the tithe for the poor should be separated in the lands of Ammon and Moav in the sabbatical year. In Babylonia, which is around Iraq, The second tithe should be separated the sabbatical year, as is the practice in most years. These were special lands where a lot of Jews lived, where the rabbis instituted that sections should be separated as well. Okay, so here's another gift. So today we're running through all the different gifts. After taking the first tithe, the Levi should separate 1/10 and give it to a Kohen. So this is a 1/10 of a 1/10. You give every farmer would give first a 50th, 2% to a Kohen. Then you would give 10% to the Levi. And of the 10% that the Levi received, he would need to give 10% to the Kohen. And this is called Trumas Meiser, which is the gift of Meiser. So now that the poor man received his Meiser, his tithe, he gives a gift to the Kohen. As the Torah says, the Levites say, and he doesn't bring the whole pasuk, but that they also need to give. So everybody has their responsibilities. When the poor people pass by the owner of the field while he is in the field and in possession of the tithe for the poor, he should give each poor person who passes by him a portion of the tithe that will satisfy him, as implied by the pasuk, and they shall eat in your gates and be satisfied. So basically that's tithe. You don't need to actually, the poor can come to you, but any poor man should be given from that tithe. How much is a portion that will satisfy the poor person? If from wheat, he should give him no less than half a kav. A kav is approximately just under 1,400 cubic centimeters, according to Shirei Torah, or almost double that, according to the Chazon Ish. This quantity will enable him to produce a quantity of food appropriate for a meal. So that's how much wheat you should give him. If from barley, you should give him no less than a kav. That's double the amount. Yes, if out of barley, he needs more to sustain himself. If from spelt, he should give him no less than a kav. Again, double as much as wheat. Maybe the kernels take up a lot more weight in barley and spelt. I'm not sure. I mean the shells. If from dried figs, he should give him no less than a kav. If from a mass of figs, he should give him no less than the weight of 25 sla'im, which is about 90 grams in contemporary measures. So that's a finished product. It's an actual mass of figs that I think it's like a cake that you could actually go ahead and eat. If from wine, you should give him no less than half a loaf. So that's, usually we have a revius, which we have on Shabbos, which is about 80. Revius would be a quarter. So half would be half a loaf, which would be the about 1,600. No, 1 second. 160 mil. Yeah. Half of 345 is about 160. Yeah. Little more. If from oil, you should give him no less than a fourth of a loaf, which is about 86 mil. If from rice, you should give him no less than a fourth of a kav, which again is about 86 mil. If he gives him vegetables, you should give him a liter weight, i.e. the weight of 35 dinarim. From carobs, you should give him 3 kabim, which is a lot more. From nuts, 10. From peaches, 5 kav. From pomegranates, 2 kav. And esrog, 1. If he gives him from other produce, you should not give him less than would enable him to sell them and to buy food for 2 meals in the proceeds. So that's really the end calculation. You want to give him of whatever produce you have in your field, enough that if he sells it, he'll be able to buy 2 meals for himself. So we said that you've got to give 10% of your produce, but that's all in all. But when the actual poor man shows up, how much should you leave him with? You should leave him with enough to be able to make himself 2 meals. If one only has a small amount of produce, and there are many poor people, so that he does not have enough to give each the appropriate measure, he should place the entire quantity before them, and they should divide it amongst themselves. The owners do not have the right to apportion the tithe to the poor that is given away at the grain heap at their discretion. So you can't decide which poor person you want to give it to. Instead, the poor come and take it against their will. Even the poor among the Jewish people can expropriate from them. When, by contrast, one gives out the tithe of the poor in his home, he may give it to any poor man to whom he desires. So I guess what's out in the field, they could just come and take by force. But what he has in his home, he can decide who he's going to give it to. I'm not sure why it would be in his home. Maybe we'll discuss this at greater length. When a person has a quantity of the tithe for the poor in his grain heap, and he desires to give it to a poor person who is his relative or acquaintance, he should set aside half of it to give to him and half to give to all the poor who pass by according to the measures mentioned above. So here we say that he can set aside for his own family, the poor in his own family or people that he knows. I guess provided that he leaves for everybody else. But if the half that he left for the public ran out, maybe he would have to give the other half as well. When does the concept that one must give a poor person enough to satisfy him apply? In the field? If, however, he has tithes in his home, he may divide it among all the poor people, giving each one even only an olive-sized portion. For he is not commanded to give him an amount necessary to satisfy him except in a field. For there are no others there from whom to take, as implied by the verse, and they shall eat in your gates and be satisfied. So if poor people are coming knocking on your door, then you're not going to be able to necessarily give each guy whatever he needs. After all, he's going from door to door to door. So then you can just give even a very small amount. You certainly do not want to turn him away empty-handed. I know sometimes you'd rather turn away somebody empty-handed and give them a very small amount, but the Torah says give him a small amount. If a man and a woman come to a person possessing tithes at home, we give to the woman first and allow her to depart and then give to the man. Obviously, because it's harder for her to go around begging than it is for a man. She's more private. In the situations when one of the pair, a father and his son, a person and his relatives, two brothers, two partners, was poor, the other may give him the tithes for the poor which he possesses. Okay. When two poor people receive a field under a sharecropping agreement, one may separate the tithe for the poor from his portion and give it to his colleague, and his colleague may do the same. So if they're both poor and they both have property, then they actually can each give to each other. When a person receives the right to harvest the field, he is forbidden to collect the leket, shifcha, payah, and the tithe for the poor. When does the above apply? When he accepted a field with the proviso that he receive a portion of the produce of the entire field. For example, he was given a third of the field to use for himself, to keep for himself, or a quarter of the field as his wage. If, however, the owner of the field told him, you will receive only a third of what you harvest, or a fourth of what you will harvest, the harvester of the field does not have a right to anything until he harvests it. Hence, at the time of the harvest, he's a poor man. Since right now he's still poor because he hasn't been given his dues, therefore he is forbidden to collect leket, shifcha, and payah, but he is forbidden to take the tithes for the poor. The rationale is that the tithe for the poor is separated only after the harvest is complete. And at that point, he is no longer a poor man because he's now gotten what he's been promised. When a person sells his field, both the land and the produce, and becomes impoverished, he is permitted to collect leket, shifcha, and payah and tithe for the poor from it. The purchaser is forbidden to collect these presents even though he has not yet paid the money, because now he owns it. So the previous owner is now poor. He could be one of those collecting. The new buyer now has the field that he owns the whole field, so he wouldn't be able to take from those sections. Even if he borrowed the money and purchased it, he can no longer collect the presents for the poor because right now he has a field of his own. The tithe for the poor may not be used as payment for a loan, nor can it be given in exchange for favors. It may be used for an act of kindness, but one must tell the recipient that it is the tithe for the poor. It should not be used to redeem captives, given as shushvidis, which would be a package that one would give a newly married couple, nor given as a specific gift to charity, a cat, meaning a specific amount that you committed yourself to. It may not be taken out of Israel into the diaspora. As the Torah says, you shall place it in your gates, and it is written that they shall eat it in your gates and be satiated. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, I wasn't as prepared as I like to be. Didn't have as much time to sit down, but I hope that it has still been interesting. In summary, we started by we ran through the actual process at the beginning. How exactly does a person apportion the different amounts? First, he gives trubah, which is a 50th, and then he gives 10% to the Levi, and then he gives another 10% to be eaten in Jerusalem in year 1, 2, and year 4 and 5, and then in year 3 and 6, that second 10 is given to the poor, and then the Levi needs to separate 10% of his 10% and give it to a Kohen. And then the rest of the chapter spoke specifically about the 10% that is given to the poor, how any poor man can come and take it even against the owner's will. However, sometimes he does have an opportunity to set aside some of this for his family. And then finally, we spoke about how much a person should give to the poor person that comes to his door. And a few more laws about the 10%. Thank you so much for joining. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat